Hey guys, it's Michael Schwartz from Gun Owners Radio, and I'm here to talk to you about a company that we've all heard of and we all love, Magpul. Magpul's a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. They're a really great company run by great people, and they make really great products, and that's why they're in every gun shop you go into. The Second Amendment is truly under attack, and the easiest way you can help fight is to support companies that support groups like Gun Owners Radio. So when you're looking for a new product and you go down to the gun store or wherever you buy your gun products, check out Magpul products and thank them for supporting the Second Amendment.
Okay, welcome to Gun Owners Radio Magnum. You all know that we shoot a live show in the radio studio here in San Diego on 1170 AM every Sunday from 4 to 6. You can hear us live on the radio if you're in the San Diego area, or you can actually go to youtube.com/gunownersradio, and you can watch and listen to the show live, or you can see us on any of the podcasting services after. But the Gun Owners Magnum is where we get into a deeper discussion, a long-form interview with extremely interesting people across the Second Amendment spectrum. So, in that, we have an extremely great guy who's a lot of fun, and unless you've been living under a rock, you know exactly who he is. He has Riding Shotgun with Charlie, Mr. Charlie Cook. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
You bet, man. Thanks for joining us. The stuff you produce online is hilarious, and it's an interesting mix. You basically have two things going on, and it's an interesting mix of funny and fun and thought-provoking and interesting. And the funny part are the GunGrams. Tell everybody what a GunGram is.
All right. Well, a GunGram is a music video of sorts where I put the camera in front of me, I play the trumpet with one hand, and I shoot a gun with the other hand. And I've got about 200. I've got over 250 of these on YouTube, and they've been watched over 20 million times all over the world.
20 million times. Now, when you started this, did you ever think you'd be saying they've been watched over 20 million times?
I didn't think I would do a thing with these. This was a crazy idea I had with a friend of mine. I spent a lot of time. I spent 10 years playing in a Motown disco funk band, and my gigging days are done. Having kids and having a family and all that sort of stuff. So then I got into gun stuff, and I was talking with a friend of mine. We're having a couple drinks, and he says, "You know what's really cool?" He says, "You get that little look in your eye when you talk about your old gigging days." And he's like, "It'd be really funny if you made some videos where you play the trumpet with one hand and shot a gun with the other hand." And of course, I thought that was completely ridiculous. So he's like, "No, it'd be great. You go out and play bum 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 bum." Pow, 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 pow. I'm like, man, that's stupid. So I went home and I worked on one-handed reloading. I figured out how to play the Blue Danube Waltz and how much ammo it would take and when I would have to do one-handed mag changes. And I did one of these in 2014. So if you look up the Blue Danube Waltz, or Trumpet Glock Duet for Blue Danube, it will come up. And I did that in 2014, and then in 2015, it was one of my friend's son's birthday. And as a parent and as a musician, I hate it when kids sing happy birthday and they do the cha-cha-cha at the end of every line.
Yeah.
I'm like, what can I do to make this more digestible for myself? Is I could go out and shoot the cha-cha-cha. So I went out, I set my camera up, I took up my trumpet, I took up my AR, loaded a 30-round mag, and I played Happy Birthday, and I shot the cha-cha-cha at the end of every line. And that's when I put it on YouTube and shared it on my Facebook page, and I had a bunch of people that were like, "Oh my God, dude, that's cool. My birthday's coming up in a couple months. Could you do one of those for me?" And then, Happy Birthday turned into TV themes and movie themes and Indiana Jones and, I mean, man, the Star Wars theme and all sorts of stuff. So I ended up putting those out in 2015, and then at one point, I had a television show ask me if they could use some for the show called Right This Minute. So I'm like, yeah, of course you can use the Rocky theme, and here's a Bob Marley tune, and here's the Indiana Jones theme. And then I get a phone call from a radio station in Jacksonville, Florida, and then I did the song that the Chicago Blackhawks play when they score a goal. And I got a phone call from someone in Chicago, and they're like, "Hey, are you the guy that's doing all this stuff?" And it was just really cool. So it kind of, that's how those kind of took off. And I remember talking with one of my good friends. I'm like, I don't know what to call these, because it's not a telegram, but it's not a candygram, and it's kind of a video, and I got to make sure I put gun in there. So I came up with GunGram, and that's what I stuck with, and that's what I stayed with.
Well, it's hilarious. I love it. It's really funny. And they pop up all over the place. You know, they're in my Facebook feed. I've gotten emails forwarded to me. You know, they just kind of randomly pop up all over the place. And for a long time, it was just random guy who did this. You know, and then I discovered what I think you're probably is more of the meat and potatoes of what you do, and that's riding shotgun with Charlie. And it's kind of an in-depth interview, kind of like this, except you're doing what I'm doing. You're talking to folks that are super interesting, but you're riding around in a car. Talk about that. What was how did that come about?
So I about 6 or 7 years ago, I joined this group called Toastmasters, and it's to work on your speaking and presenting skills. And it was something for me to do to get out of the house and get away from everybody. I was working on this manual that was called Communicating on Video. And some of the projects you had to do is you had to be interviewed by someone for 5 to 7 minutes, and you had to interview someone for 5 to 7 minutes and do a press release or an editorial and do a press conference. And then you had to make a video. So what I did for making a video is I interviewed one of my other fellow Toastmasters, and I had my iPhone 4 and my daughter's I don't even know which one it was. It's the one you could just play games on, right? And it was before the iPhones. But I videotaped me interviewing someone else, and I said, this is really cool and this is kind of fun. And I started, just like everyone else, I would see the carpool karaoke's with James Corden, and I'd be like, you know what? He's a chubby guy and he's English, and I'm a chubby guy and I speak English. I think I can do what he's doing. So it went to, how can I do this? I've been a gun instructor for a while, so I'm like, how can I do this with gun folks? And I'm like, I'm going to drive people around and interview them in my car, and I'm going to call it Riding Shotgun. And writingshotgun.com was taken, so I'm like, I'm going to call it Riding Shotgun with Charlie. This way it's different. And I interviewed my mentor and some local friends and some musicians I played with and some gun instructors. I ended up contacting Ken Blanchard, who's the black man with the gun. And I said, hey, I'm starting through this project, and I've been listening to your show for a long time, and I would love to have you on the show. So we set up a date, and I drove down from Massachusetts down to D.C., and I actually had on Anthony Calandro from the Gun for Hire range in New Jersey. And he's now an NRA board member, and I messaged him, I emailed him, and I didn't hear back from him. But when I was driving through Jersey, I'd see all these towns pop up, and I'm like, man, he can't be too far. So I looked on my phone, I found his range, and I went to his range, and I said, I just want to say hi to Anthony. I'm a big fan of the show. And I actually did a GunGram for him while I had a cigar in my mouth while I played the trumpet and shot my 1911.
Wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
He popped his head out of his office, and he's like, aren't you the guy that plays the trumpet and shoots a gun? I'm like, I am. And he's like, stick around for a minute. So I stuck around. He came out with a bunch of swag to give me. And he's like, what are you doing down here? I said, I'm starting an interview show, and I'm going down to interview Ken Blanchard. He's like, tell the Rev I said hi. And I'm like, I think I just got some special handshake, and I'm in some sort of a club now, but I don't really know what it is, and I don't know what it means. So and then I had the one little angel on one side saying, tell Anthony you emailed him and want to be on, that you want to have him on the show. And I had the other one that's like, no, you emailed him and he didn't answer. So I'm like, I sent you an email and wanted to know if you want to be on the show. And he's like, yeah, things have been crazy. Here's my number. When are you going to be in town? I'm like, tomorrow night. He's like, call me then. So I had him on the show, and it was really cool. And then I ended up interviewing Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. I interviewed him at Minneapolis at the Minnesota State Fair, and he called me the very next day, and he's like, man, that was a lot of fun. I want to help you out. And I'm like, okay, don't really know what this means, but I'm gonna take it. And he called me 2 days afterwards and said, I got you an opportunity to speak at the Gun Rights Policy Conference on the panel of people that use new media to promote gun rights. Do you want to do it? I'm like, absolutely. And then I went down to GRPC in Tampa, and it's been great since then. I get to hang out with all the cool folks like you guys, and it's just so much fun.
So let's, and it's awesome, and it's really, really interesting. I enjoy the in-depth interviews. I think that whole trend, the long-form, in-depth interviews, is good. You know, it's getting to know people and understanding what makes them tick is amazingly interesting, and it's a lot better content than the internet has produced in other areas. So tell me a little bit about the mechanics. I'm curious. You've interviewed a lot of people. You have a lot of interviews up in a very short amount of time. So and you just kind of walked us through, well, I went here and that happened, but are you going to them, or do you just, how does that work? How are you getting all your interviews? Cause you're interviewing people from Maine down to, the South and across the country.
Here's how it works. I figure out where I'm going. If I have to go someplace for something, and I try to figure out who is there and who I could have on the way. Like, for instance, next month I'm taking my daughter to Nashville, because that's where she wants to go to college, and she wants to do a university tour. So there's a big name person that I'm going to interview. I messaged him and I said, hey, I've got this show. It's called Riding Shotgun with Charlie. I'm not a complete stranger. I'm not a complete wacko. I've had Rob Pincus and Kevin Dixie and Diana Muller and Masada Ayub in the car. So I'm not some, I don't want to say I'm not a crazy person, but but it's like I'm just some stranger. You're going to get in the car with. So I've reputable people. And I was the Second Amendment Foundation awarded me the Blogger of the Year at the Gun Rights Policy Conference in 2019.
I saw that. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I was telling everyone, I'm like, I'm Blogger of the Year, didn't write a word. So I'll tell you who it is. I'm not sure when the show's going to come out, but I messaged Hickok45, and I said,
oh, there you go.
I'm coming down to Nashville. I'd love to have you on the show. And he wrote back. He's like, all right, what date are you looking at? And sends me his email, and he's like, contact me and we'll make a plan. So I did the same sort of thing. I had some family stuff going on in the Midwest. So I contacted someone in Milwaukee. I contacted Argo J, and I had Rhonda Izell on the show. So I called Rhonda. I said, hey, I'm going up to Milwaukee to interview Argo. Do you want to come with us? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. So I pick her up on the south side of Chicago. I drive up to Milwaukee and do the show with Argo. I drop him off. I drop Rhonda off, and I go back to my friend's house. So it's one of the.
You're just making your way. You're making your way across country. In fact, your catchphrase is.
My catchphrase is, let's get the hashtag stagecoach across America.
Nice.
And I love it.
So let's go back a little bit, because all this is happening. You're making it happen. It's really interesting. It's good content. But we've touched on a couple of things. Number one, you travel a lot. You're a musician. How did all this start? It sounds like you have a family. But when did you get into guns?
So I got into gun stuff. After I became a father, I wasn't into hunting and shooting. The first time I went on a hunting trip with a buddy of mine after I'd been a gun owner for a while, I got grossed out opening up the frogs in high school. So dissecting an animal is sensory overload for me. It smells gross. It's ugh. So it wasn't anything that I did. And on September 11th, it changed many of our lives, as I'm sure it did for you. I ended up having to watch everything in the teacher's room at the school I was teaching at. And my son was 9 months old, and I woke up and said, hey, we live in a dangerous world. I have this little guy that I need to protect, and I need to be able to protect me so I can protect him and I can raise him. And I sat in the teacher's room with all these left-leaning teachers, and I was relatively apolitical at the time. But I sat in the room with all these left-leaning teachers, and I said, hey, if somebody comes in the school that's not supposed to be here, all the teachers on the first floor should have guns, and they should shoot the bad guy, and the teachers on the second floor can keep on teaching. And we'll need half the grief counseling and half, all that sort of stuff. And they looked at me and they're like, yeah, that's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. So February vacation came, and I'm like, I'm going to go get a gun license. I'm going to show you guys what this is about. And I started the process here in Massachusetts in February, and I think by June I had a gun license, and I never fired a gun before. I was now a card-carrying NRA member at the time and had a gun license, never fired a gun. And then I remember telling my mother that I'm really into this gun stuff, and it seems kind of cool, and I'm getting the Armed Citizens magazine, or the Armed Citizens column in the NRA magazines. And my mother said, why don't you come out and get your dad's guns? So I drove out to the Midwest, and I came home with a couple shotguns and a couple handguns, and joined a local shooting range, and I got into it. It's just a lot of fun.
I think that's the temptation is to go, hey, wow, that's unique, and I think your story is becoming the story. Back in the 70s and the 80s and before, more people hunted. They grew up in a rural area, but truly, few people were carrying a gun for self-defense. It was more about hunting and culture and that sort of thing. Somewhere in the 90s, and then especially in the 2000s, all that shifted, and I think a lot of it had to do with states like Florida becoming shall issue when it comes to CCWs, and I think that was an enormous shift in who is a gun owner and why they become a gun owner. The temptation is to say, "Wow, you're a teacher, you're in Massachusetts." You didn't grow up hunting, and you got a gun because you had a baby. I think the temptation is to go, wow, that's unusual. But I think, Charlie, you're the story. You're now who gun owners are, if you go back over the last 20, 25 years.
Oh, absolutely. I have, obviously I'm in Massachusetts. I have a number of liberal friends. And when I get into gun stuff, they're like, we all thought you guys were in Duck Dynasty and had the long beards. We never thought somebody like you would be a gun owner. And I'm like, I think I should be offended by this. Right? Like, you're the one, you sit here and think because I'm a middle-aged, overweight white guy that I'm a bigot and a racist and I'm a sexist and a misogynist. But just because I have a gun, and I'm still the same person that I was when I was friends with them. But I said, you're judging me just because I have a gun, and you're judging other people just because they have guns as well, and that makes you kind of a bigot.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people make a lot of assumptions about me because of my association with I work for a Second Amendment organization, and they make assumptions about my politics. They make assumptions about my background, and it's a cold bucket of water when they find out that no, I don't necessarily. I definitely fit some stereotypes. Like I said, I'm an overweight white guy who drives a Jeep Wrangler. There's definitely some stereotypes there. But it's interesting. But I think that stereotype is it's changing, and there are people who benefit. They disagree with what you and I see when we think of gun ownership, and they benefit from this negative stereotype, and they're not letting it go away. But more and more, I started carrying 2 years ago. We finally had the ability to get CCWs in San Diego, so I started carrying just over 2 years ago. And I don't have kids, but I remember thinking just a couple of months into it. You kind of go over that first couple of months where you think everybody knows you have a gun, and you're like, I don't know, is this okay? And then you get used to it, and it becomes really comfortable. And somewhere when after that happened, I thought to myself, how do parents do it? Like, how do you leave your house with your most precious, little baby, and you're wide open, you're totally naked, you can't protect yourself, let alone this beautiful human being that you're supposed to be raising. I can't imagine it. Have you met other people who got into gun ownership for the same reason?
I'm sure I have. Absolutely. I guess when I was first into gun stuff and I had the idea, I had one of my musician friends say to me, he's like, what, do you want to carry like a snub-nosed 38? I'm like, that is exactly what I want to carry. And I got to this point where I'm like, listen, you know what? I love my kids enough that I'm willing to take someone's life to be able to protect them. And to me, that is a big sign of, hey, this is how much I love you. I love you so much that I will sit in jail if I have to keep you alive. And just like you said, I look at other people, I'm like, how do you not feel that? My liberal friends, I'm like, how do you not feel that now that you're married and you have kids? Don't you want to protect your kids? Don't you want to be around for your kids? Yes, I think I'm never going to have to use a gun, but that doesn't matter. I carry one because I want to be able to protect myself,
Yeah, I think it's USCCA has a really good commercial where they talk about it being a shield, not a sword. Carrying a firearm, a shield, not a sword. It's to protect you, and I think that's the way of gun culture these days. Now, when you were a musician, tell us about being a musician. You said you traveled for a bit in different bands. Talk to us about your music career.
All right. Well, it's after I got out of college, I ended up playing in this band, just traveling the country. We stayed at Well,
where'd you go to college? Where'd you go to college?
I moved from the Midwest, and I went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I was 16 years old. I went to a jazz clinic when I was in high school with the jazz group, and there was a trombone player that they had that taught at Berklee, and I'm like, 16 years old, I'm like, I'm going to go study with this guy. I don't care what happens. I'm moving to Boston. When I'm old enough, I'm going to college. I'm going to go to Berklee. And that's where I went to college. And after I got out of college, went back to the Midwest, I eventually had I got a phone call from someone that said, hey, we got your number from a teacher at Berklee, and we want you to join our band and play on the road. And I'm like, that is what I want to do. I'm 23 years old. I have no responsibilities. That you can pay me $200 and I can live in the hotel and eat at the employee cafeteria for $1. I'm like, dude, that's the life, man.
You're living the life.
This is absolutely.
Dream. You've made it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we ended up getting a gig in downtown Nashville, actually not far from where that was bombed recently. We had a gig at a place down on 2nd Ave in Nashville, and that lasted probably 6 or 7 months. And one of the going jokes in Nashville is, what do you call a musician without a girlfriend? And the answer is homeless. And I thought that was really funny till I had to ask my girlfriend if I could move my stuff into her apartment. I'm like, this ain't funny anymore. So I ended up going back home to the Midwest, and I got a teaching job for a year, and just a couple years.
Wait, so you were playing. What were you playing? You were playing trombone or?
I'm a trombone player. My real instrument's the trombone.
Okay, so you were playing trombone in like a jazz band, or what kind of band was it?
It was just a cover band. We had cool, hyped up versions of not necessarily pop tunes, but we played old Motown tunes, and they had the rhythm section would play a set of hard rock tunes and stuff and classic rock.
Is it hard being a trombone player? There's, if you're a drummer, you can get a gig any night of the week. Being a trombone player, was that difficult getting a gig, or is there a lot of work for a trombone player?
I lucked into it. I really did. Like, these guys just called me and said, "Hey, we've got a band. We play on the road. Do you want to join us?" Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I'll tell you, here's the reason I asked, Charlie. This is totally random, as the kids say these days. I was listening to Tom Petty. He's got his own channel on Sirius. And he actually told a joke, and he said, "What's the difference between a frog and a trombone player?" And the answer is, do you know the answer?
There's a couple answers. One of them is the frog is on his way to a gig.
Yes.
Oh, the other answers are there were skid marks in front of the frog.
Oh no, jeez. So honestly, that's why I asked. I thought, I kind of chuckled. I'm in my car listening to Tom Petty, and I kind of chuckled, pretending like I got the joke. And I thought, what does that mean? Or did trombone players not get gigs? So that's why I asked.
There's not a lot of gigs for trombone players, absolutely. So
what about in the '90s when ska came back? Did that help?
It absolutely did. I ended up moving back to Boston a couple years after I got out of college. About 2.5 years after college, I moved back to Boston. I got together with some of my college friends, and I joined a wedding band because it was, a gig that paid money, and I wanted to play, and I had a teaching job. And at one point, I was teaching 5 days a week, and I was playing in a band 4 nights a week. And playing on a Wednesday night at a nightclub really makes you look forward to Thursday night, And at one point, I was, I had earrings. I was wearing cowboy boots. I was being a teacher during the day. I was playing in a Motown disco funk band at nights, and then for fun, I was playing with a ska band, and it was it was great, man. It was just so much fun. There wasn't time for me to get into trouble, I guess, because I was always busy.
Okay, so you'd mentioned a little earlier that when you started getting into firearms, that your colleagues, when you were a teacher, tended to be left of center. And you said that I believe you said you were apolitical, just weren't really into politics at all. What got you into politics? Did gun ownership help, or how did you get more interested in politics?
I'm going to say maybe having a kid helped, because I'm like, what kind of a world am I leaving to my kids, and all that sort of stuff. One of the things that we did when I was gigging is we had in October of 2000, when Al Gore and George Bush Jr. debated at UMass Boston, we had the opportunity to play at Al Gore's post-debate party. So I'm like, all right, well, that's kind of cool, right? And I wasn't paying much into politics, but I had to take a half a day off of school. I had to go to the Park Plaza Hotel in the Back Bay of Boston, and we had to go through the metal detector with the Secret Service and everything. And our pay, I'm going to use air quotes when I say pay, our pay was to have a meet and greet with Al Gore.
Oh.
Yeah, and somebody videotaped it. And it was a whole 2 minutes he spent with us mugging and posing pictures and shaking hands. It was kind of cool that the mayor of Boston came out, and he was a wicked lefty, if I can say that. He was, it's Boston. He was led by a Democrat. So Tom Menino came out, and then John Kerry came out, and then Ted Kennedy came out, and then Tipper Gore came out, and then Al Gore came out, and it was, it was going nuts and crazy, and it was kind of cool. But I'm like, he walked away, said we sounded great, and then he walked away. And I looked at our sax player. I said, the guy's a liar, right? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, he said we sounded great, and he didn't hear us play a note.
Now, did you have to run your whole playlist by Tipper to make sure that
there no profanity, right?
Right? Yeah, you didn't play anything that she wanted to ban.
No, she wasn't even there when we played. We hung out. We hung out all afternoon. They had this big ballroom with a huge screen on it. They had a huge American flag behind us. They watched the debate. When the debate was over, we played for 25 minutes. And hung out, listened to all these people talk, got our little meet and greet, and went home.
Wow.
Yeah, I do think I grew up relatively conservative about things. Like we didn't, my folks weren't into drinking and doing drugs or anything like this, and I think we've always been pretty conservative. My sisters are relatively conservative about a lot of things. So I guess being more conservative is more, when I got older, I'm like, hey, this is what this is, and I don't want someone to not have a gun, because I don't think they should have it. If they want to have it, they seem a little dangerous to me. Like, do whatever you want to do. Just don't bother me and don't hurt me in the whole process. And that's, I think gun ownership had more to do with how I lean politically. I'm at the point now where I don't care what you do, as long as what you do makes you happy. Rock on. I'm not going to tell you to own a gun if you don't want to own one. I don't want you to tell me that I can't do something if you don't agree with it. I'm not going to not do it because you don't agree with it. You're not going to do what I think you should do. And, there's the great memes that go around that say, I carry a gun not to inflict my will on someone else. I carry a gun so someone else doesn't inflict their will on me. And that's exactly where I'm at. I'm not going to carry a gun. My anti-gun friends, I'm sure you've had this too, they say, well, what do you carry a gun for? What are you going to get into a fight on the side of the road? I'm 51 years old. I've never been in a fight on the side of a road. You're going to shoot someone if they park too close to you? I'm like, what are you, crazy? Like, maybe you're not smart enough to have a gun, you know? it's a...
Yeah. So 9/11, you start, right after 9/11, you, sounds like I think, believe the February after 9/11, you start, getting into firearms ownership. You said it started making you a little bit more political, I believe. Was there do you remember like a kind of a first hot button topic, where you were just like, more, you felt like, hey, I got to get into politics. Like, this, maybe it was gun ownership, maybe it was the Second Amendment, but was there a political awakening? Was there something that happened and you said, hey, I got to get more into this?
Yeah, I don't know if it was more specific. I don't know if there's anything specific that happened. It's just like, hey, the government shouldn't be telling you to do this. And just because you don't like X, Y, and Z, you should, you still have to be responsible for yourself. So you shouldn't depend on the government for everything. The government's not going to make you happy. You need to go out and pursue this on your own. And you need to, if you want to make things happen, you got to get up and do that stuff on your own, And then, like I said, everything was just a little more conservative that way. The gun stuff with me, after that, I was a gun owner. I joined the local club. I started to run bowling pin shoots at one of the local clubs I belonged to. So I had to become a range safety officer. I started to volunteer some time with the Gun Owners Action League, which is the state's pro group here in Massachusetts. And I would, they'd have these things they called firearm safety education days. And the director of education would say, hey, listen, you're a teacher, you like gun stuff, why don't you come down and help out? All right, cool. It gets me out of the house. If we're lucky, he gives us half a box of ammo at the end of the day. This is a win, man. And then after a while, he's like, all right, so you've been doing this, why don't you become an instructor? And I'm like, what do I have to do to become an instructor? So I became an NRA certified instructor and certified through the Mass State Police, and that led to me actually teaching at a shooting school that's out here. And I did that for a little bit, and actually, I think later on, I'm teaching a class in front of 20 people. Everybody paid $100 to take the class, and I was not making anything close to that because it was working for someone else. And there was a commercial where it was for a bank, and they're giving you $100 to refer your friends. And so they showed all these people, and everybody's face started to look like Benjamin Franklin. So I'm teaching this class, and I'm looking at the class, and I'm like, everybody looks like Benjamin Franklin. I'm making $2,000 for the boss, and I'm not getting anything close to that when I leave here. So how can I come home with how can I come home with $2,000? What do I need to do? So then I became more serious about becoming an instructor and teaching classes on my own, and I became certified to teach the Refuse to Be a Victim and the basic rifle, basic shotgun, the personal protection inside the home course. I got certified to teach the Utah class and the Saber pepper spray class, and it was just a little side hustle, making a little extra money teaching gun classes. Yeah. And it was fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm going up to New Hampshire on Sunday to teach a Utah class this weekend, and it's always a lot of fun. I enjoy being in front of people. I enjoy talking. I like seeing the light go off on people's heads when they're like, oh, hey, these aren't gonna hurt anyone. And I always tell people when they're loading guns in class, I say they're nervous and their hands are sweaty and they're I'm always like, listen, you have nothing to worry about. The gun's in your hands. I'm the one that should be nervous.
Yeah, really. And you were already teaching. It was already a passion of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an easy crossover into teaching gun classes.
What were you teaching in school? What subject? Music?
Yeah. So I've been a band teacher for a long time. I had to. I used to teach in public schools, and then I ended up getting a job in teaching in private schools. And the job I've had for the last 18 years, up until COVID, is I would go into a Catholic school, I would teach band, and I would leave. And I didn't have to stay for teacher stuff and lunch duty and recess. And I go in, I teach, and I leave. I go in, I teach, and I leave. And I ended up having a lot less contact with teachers, which I kind of enjoyed. I go in, I teach, and I leave. And then I legit had this secret life outside of school where the last couple of years I started calling myself the world famous Mr. Cook. And I'd look at these little third grade kids, and they're like, "You're not world famous, Mr. Cook." Okay, all right, well, come on down. Let's just take some lessons and let's play. It's really, Clark Kent Superman going on.
Well, being a band teacher kind of got cool in the last 10 years with School of Rock and that guy on the YouTube guy who gets his kids to play Tool. Yeah, band got really cool in the last 10 years.
I've always thought it's been cool.
Well, of course. Let me be more accurate, Charlie. The School of Rock, the movie, and then the YouTube playing Tool songs, it's helped shed this one time at band camp, that whole thing. That's gone away, and now it's the Tool kids,
Right. I used to tell people all the time. I'm like, I had people come up to me when I was gigging, and they're like, "Hey, man, it looks like you're having a good time up there." I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And they're like, I was in high school, and I was in junior high, played in high school a little bit, but then I got a car, and I met a girl, and I got on a sports team, and then I messed up my knee, and I can't play sports anymore. And I'm like, yeah, that's too bad, man. I like playing a band instrument's the least dangerous thing you can do. You're not going to have some sort of an injury that's going to stop you from playing. So even at my age and as long as I've been playing, I still like to pick up an instrument and play it just for fun.
Nice. So as a teacher, and then so you're married and you buy a gun. You're a teacher and you buy a gun. You start talking about gun ownership. You start instructing. It becomes more of your life, and then within the last few years, you actually start putting out gun videos. Along the way, has there been pushback from friends, family, employers? Like when you made the decision to buy a gun after 9/11, what was your wife's reaction?
So I do want to clarify that I'm happily divorced now, but it's at first she wasn't for it. It's not that she was against it, but she's like, well, we've got young kids, and I'm like, it's kind of why we want to have a gun, sweetheart. And she's like, okay, well, we got to keep them locked up, and we can't have any ammunition in the house. I'm like, all right, you know what? This is a step in the right direction. I'll take it. So I would buy ammo, I would stop at the range, and then I would use it all, and then go home with no ammo. And then after she went shooting with me a couple times, she's like, okay, this isn't so bad. We can have ammo in the basement and keep the guns upstairs. I'm like, all right, very cool. And that's the way it was for a while. And then we ended up, the more I get into it, I started teaching classes. We moved to a different town, and I got a license with no restrictions on it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to start to carry because I think this is an important thing to do. And so I started to carry. We would go to church, and she would reach over to see if I had a gun on me, just to know if I had one when we were going to church. And I'm like, church is the only place I can carry. So yes, I'm going to carry in church, And I haven't, from some of my friends, they think it's ridiculous and crazy. But then when I say to them, you know what, I'm doing a radio show in San Diego, or I've been on radio in Chicago, or I have one secretary at one of my schools. I would sit here and I would say, hey, listen, I'm making a video playing the trumpet and shooting a gun for someone in Australia. And she's like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm like, you don't believe me, do you? She's like, no, I believe you. and it kept getting this way. And I'm like, you know what, I did an interview here. I'm going here to speak here. I was on this radio show. I was on this podcast. And what did it for her is a couple years ago, there was an article in the local paper about one of the Toastmaster groups that I was in. And she came up to me and she's like, oh my God, Charlie, you're famous. And I'm like, what did I do? What made me famous? And she's like, you were in the Telegram. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah, they did that a couple months ago. She's like, oh, and this is a school where the teachers are like, we hate that you come here. We hate that you take our kids out of lessons all day. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want to hang out with these people, Then they see me in the paper and they're like, is this our Charlie? I can't believe our Charlie's in the paper. And I sat there for 2 more lessons, and I did a GunGram at the Gun Rights Policy Conference in Chicago that year, and it was going to be on Vice News and on HBO. So I sat there stewing about me being in the Telegram, and I went back to the secretary. I said, you know what? I'm going to be on television on HBO Vice News. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, but being in the Telegram is what makes me famous. Being on television all over the country, playing a trumpet, shooting a gun, doesn't make me famous, but being in the newspaper does? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
I'm like, well, this is...
It's kind of a version of all politics is local right there, I guess.
Right. I think it was in the Bible, I'm not sure, but somebody said you're never famous in your hometown, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So but you've never been, we actually have one of our members is a music teacher, and she carries concealed, and she's very vocal about it. And, obviously she can't on campus, but in her private life, and she takes training very seriously. And it's been at least one local news report about her, and she got a lot of flack. Now this is California, but you're in Massachusetts. It's not a whole lot better. Have you haven't gotten any pushback, or no one said, "Hey, I'm not teaching with that guy," or nothing like that?
I haven't had anything like that. I've had some. I do have some principals that I work with that I keep it quiet about what I do. I tell some people and don't tell others. I mean, I'm cautious about who I tell. I have had some kids discover the GunGram page on YouTube. There was the Mario theme has I think it's got 3.4 million views on it or something, and it ended up on the number 27 trending video a few years ago, and Chris Hardwick put it on some show on Comedy Central. So I went into school one day, and these kids are like, "Hey, Mr. Cook, we saw your YouTube channel." I'm like, "YouTube channel? What are you talking about?" "Yeah, you're playing the trumpet, shooting a gun." I'm like, it seems a little dangerous. Like, why would someone do that? And they're like, "It was you." And I'm like, might have been somebody that looked like me. And they're like, "It was definitely you, Mr. Cook." I'm like, all right, listen, don't tell the second grade teacher, because she's not really a big fan of guns, okay? Just let it be our little secret,
That's funny. That's funny. So
one more story. I was teaching a gun class at the shooting school, and 4 hours of talking and teaching and gun stuff and gun stories and so on and so forth. I had this kid in the back. I'm like, "Does anyone have any questions?" Some kid raises his hand in the back, and he said, "I used to take trumpet lessons from you. How come you weren't this fun when you had trumpet lessons?" And nice. I bit my tongue, and I wanted to say, "You probably didn't practice, did you?"
Yeah, really. Yeah, thanks. I think that's So out of all the people you've interviewed, and again, you've interviewed a lot. I was looking through there, and there was a lot of really interesting folks. What was your favorite interview? What's one that sticks out and you thought, man, this was really awesome?
When I first had the idea, I made a list of names of people that would be a dream to get in the car. Like, who could I never get in the car? And one of them was Masad Ayub. And a couple years ago, Florida Carry was doing a camping event, and they invited me to speak and play the national anthem, and Masad Ayub was going to be speaking as well. So I got to be on the same roster as Masad Ayub, and I emailed him. I called him, and it was one of these things where I'm like, you know what? I've got to set a time for myself to call him, and if I don't, then I'm a knucklehead and a loser. So 3 minutes after that time expired, I'm like, all right, I've got to call him. I called him. I said, "Hey, my name's Charlie. I do this. I'm going to be at this event. You're going to be at this event. Would you mind getting in the car and riding around with me?" He says, "Nope, sounds great." I'm like, "Okay, cool, thanks, goodbye." And that was it. So I ended up interviewing him, and we ended up getting lost. Because I'm going to places all over the country, and I don't know every place I'm going, and I don't want to be glued to my the GPS on my phone and stuff. So I ended up missing this turn to get back to the camping ground with Masad Ayub, and we turned around, and then I ended up not going far enough to make the turn, so I ended up turning around again, and then I'm like, okay, I definitely missed this road, and I'm way too far, so I turned around a third time, and just as we ended up getting back on the right road. And just as we were about to get there, and I'm wrapping the show up, I said, Mash, you're not going to have to call your wife and tell her that we're lost. And he said, well, this is the first time that an Arab has ever been hijacked and kidnapped. I'm like, dude, that was gold.
He is. I mean, for someone of his his accomplishments and his stature in our community, enormously generous with his time. We've had him on the show. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's extremely interesting, but is more than happy to. Yeah, all right, great. When do you need me to call in? How long do you need me to talk?
Yeah, like doesn't bat an eye about giving up. Honestly, giving up time, but he's more than willing to help people out and talk to them.
I haven't seen all your interviews, but I think my favorite was the gentleman who stopped the church shooting down in Texas. Stephen, that was a fantastic interview. I really truly encourage everyone out there to find that interview on Charlie Cook's page. It was interesting. It was extremely interesting. But I actually I met him kind of accidentally a few years ago, and I was doing a little booth at a church event where he was a speaker, and he was waiting to go on stage and talk. He was the featured speaker, and he came over and he sat down next to me, and he was eating some like Doritos or something, and offered me some, and we just kind of chatted. I didn't know who he was. I knew his name, and I knew that was the featured speaker, but I'd never seen a picture of him. And so we're just chatting. He's a really nice, kind of normal guy, and it's just an amazing what he did. As brave as he was and as assertive as he was, when you compare that to the actual guy. He's not a superhero. He wasn't wearing a cape. He was just a normal, regular guy, and he was really endearing.
Oh, he was great. I went to the Rod of Iron Festival in Greeley, Pennsylvania, in October last year, and he was one of the speakers. And then this other gentleman, his name was Teddy Daniels, and he was a politician in Pennsylvania. And I brought my cameras with me because I'm like, I don't know who's going to be here. I don't know who I can get on the show. I'm just trying to be prepared. I was going someplace. I brought my cameras. If I can get someone, great. If I don't, that's okay too. But I'm prepared. So I went up to Stephen Williford and I said, hi, my name's Charlie. I've got this show. I've messaged you about maybe being on the show sometime, and here we're together. Can we do the show together? And he says, you'll have to talk to Teddy Daniels over there. He's the gentleman that drove me, and he's my ride. So, and he's, by the way, he's a real hero. He was shot 4 times, and then got into a gunfight, and
Jeez.
lived. And I'm like, holy moly! So I interviewed Stephen. When you hear him speak and the story, it's just unbelievable. And what's amazing to me is how he said, okay, so people will say, if God is a loving God, then how can he let something like this happen? But then when you hear Stephen say that the local hospital was doing a drill that weekend, and they had a bunch of extra nurses and doctors on hand. And when you hear him say that there was a police officer that was buying some trauma kits and kept him in his car, and he was there, and he went to his car, and he had all these medical kits. You hear all that, you're like, oh man, it was a horrible thing that happened, but there were people there that were prepared. There were other things that were going on, so less people did die than could have died. And you're just like, the gravity of the whole thing, you're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
It is, and it's a horrible tragedy. But there was actually a little piece of it that kind of made me chuckle a little. He was talking about, and it made him chuckle. He was talking about how he was holding he chased the guy down, and he was holding him there, at gunpoint, and a police officer showed up, and drop your gun and put your hands up. So he did. He had his AR and he put it down and he put his hands up, and then the cop said, "Not you." So he picked the gun back up and re-engaged, which was actually kind of funny. I mean, again, horrible tragedy, and I'm sorry anyone had to go through that, including Stephen. But it was kind of a lighthearted part of that story. I really, truly encourage everyone listening, go watch Charlie's interview with Stephen. It was really, really amazing. So what's something about you? You've been really open with us. You told us a lot about a lot of parts of your life. What's something about you that you think people would be surprised to hear?
Oh my gosh. That's I don't know if they, I don't know.
All right.
I've had a lot of, God, this is ridiculous. I've had a lot of women in my car. I've had a lot of the DC Project gals. I've had a lot of a girl and a gun gals. And what I really like is that they'll all hang out with me, and I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be overbearing with them and flirt with them or anything like this. My father died when I was a kid, and I was raised by my mom, and I have 4 sisters. So I used to tell everyone, we all had long hair and earrings. It's just how we lived, And so I think that has given me, that's given me the opportunity to be comfortable around women, but not be interested in them. And the DC Project gals, and they're all, they it's great. I went to one of the events they had in DC a couple years ago, and I hang out with all of them. And there's nothing weird, there's nothing strange. And my attitude is I've hung out with women my whole life. I'm easy to talk to. I'm non-threatening. When I used to teach at the shooting school, I would say I'm not the least threatening, most offensive is how I would like to go. But it's I like hanging out with all the DC Project gals and being being on the shows with the girls. What I really think is cool is I had Tatiana Whitlock on the show a couple.
I was about to bring her up too. She came out. She was a guest speaker at one of our events, and I'm a big fan of her. She's wonderful, and your interview with her was really great too.
So she's one of these people that didn't know who I was, and that's fine. I'm not, whatever. That doesn't bother me. But I sent her a message, and I'm like, hey, this is what I do. I've got a show. Can I drive from Massachusetts up to Portland, Maine, and have you on my show? And she'll reach out to someone else, with a girl and a gun. She reached out to Robin Sandoval, and she's like, who is this Charlie guy? And is he legit? Like, should I get in a car with this guy?
Why does he want me to get in his car?
Right? Is this the stranger danger that we talk about? And, you talk to them before the show, and they're like, yeah, we talked to so-and-so, and they said you're legit, and we're going to have a great time. I'm like, that's all we're going to do. It's my little riding shotgun gig is the easiest thing in the world. I get people in the car, we talk, we interview the show. I like to tell people that they're the fly on the rearview mirror. And I think people open up more in the car. It's a more intimate conversation than doing something like we're doing, because you're in a car and you're driving around, and it's just you two people, and whatever comes up comes up. There's things that I want to talk about when I have people in the car, but if there's been a number of times that I don't hit those things, but the conversation ends up going somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was trying to rig up a seatbelt for today's interview. That would be I couldn't quite make it work. So, I'm sorry to hear that your dad passed away when you were young. How old were you when he passed?
I was 8 years old, and
wow.
My dad had some problems with his heart, and he died on an operating table when he was 33.
Jeez.
And I mean, you talk about a lot of my issues. God, I hate saying that. A lot of my issues are because I didn't have a dad when I grew up. So there was, my dad used to go fishing. My grandfather used to go fishing. My grandfather would take me and my sisters fishing, and I'm like, oh, fish are gross. Oh, they smell bad. They're weird to touch. Oh, I don't want to do any of that stuff. Even now, when I go to the grocery store, I do not make eye contact with the fish at the counters. Like, I don't want to look at fish. I always tell people what I like about fishing is what I like about golfing, and that's smoking cigars.
Well, so you were 8 and he was 33. You were both way too young. How do you feel? How did that affect you? What was it like growing up? I mean, 8 years old. That's right when you start needing a dad the most.
You absolutely do, and it's. I mean, it's probably. I know it's affected me more than it would have, and I spend a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time. Not that I worry about it. I'm going to worry about it after we get off the phone here, but I look back at my life and I say, okay, if I had, this is what my life is like. If I had a dad, would my life be different? And if my life was different, then I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's the whole, it's, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you tell yourself? And, if I knew now what I knew then, how would things be different? And, I mean, for me, having a young son, having a 9-month-old son on September 11th, and being, holy crap, I've got this little person that I need to raise, and I have to be around for them. I got to be able to protect them because I don't want my son to grow up not having a father. Because it was one of those things that does mess with you. Playing baseball. Like I went through a stage growing up south of Chicago. I wanted to play for the Cubs. Like that would have been a cool gig to be a left fielder for the Chicago Cubs. But that didn't happen, because I didn't have someone to play baseball with, and when I joined baseball, I sucked at it too. That probably had something to do with that as well. But
well, you could have played for the Sox then,
right? You don't have to hit for them. But yeah, I
would imagine playing baseball and going through that and seeing everybody else's. I would imagine that's tough, man.
Oh my God. The movie that tears me up every single time is Field of Dreams.
Oh, geez,
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's one of those things I'm like, I'm going to watch it as few times as possible because the first time I watched it, I was just a complete wreck.
So did anybody step in, when you were a teen or growing up? Did anybody, did you have a male figure that stepped in?
After my dad died, my mom didn't end up marrying. She did end up marrying another guy. She had another child, and he just kind of disappeared. Like he left. Yeah, I didn't have that, and oh my God, I have talked to a therapist a time or two, and I went to a therapist one time, and it was a woman, and I'm like, I can't have a woman as a therapist. I said, nothing against you. I need to talk to an older man because all of my issues and all of my problems in my life are because I didn't have a strong male influence, and I needed that as a kid. I think that's super important. And when I got divorced, I fought to keep my kids 50% of the time. Because I'm like, you know what? Maybe I was a bad husband and maybe I couldn't make this relationship work. Doesn't mean I'm a bad dad. So I think I should get the kids 50% of the time and you get them 50% of the time.
Yeah, I feel like, and this, it goes back to guns that, the debate is, the other side shows everything bad that happens with a gun, people getting murdered and criminals, that sort of thing. And our side shows everything good that happens with a gun. People protecting themselves, people defending themselves, sport, it's fun. And there seems to be, we're kind of, ships passing in the night. There's this missing thing. And I feel like there's a little bit of a development in that people are both sides are starting to talk more about, well, what's happening to the people that are doing the bad things with the guns? Maybe we could help solve that problem. And it seems like more and more, we're losing rites of passage. Even like Boy Scouts is as an organization is being destroyed, and these rites of passage that are seem to be very important in every society throughout the history of man. And I feel like it seems like my psychology degree is from the University of Google, right? So, but it seems like dads kind of bring that to the table. That's one thing that they do. That's kind of, it seems to be a lot. It doesn't have to be, but it seems to be more of their role than mom's role. And I think a lot of people are missing that. There's an organization here in San Diego. They're national too, but they started here in San Diego. that we support called Boys to Men, like the group. They actually started right around this time, so right around in the 90s. So they was kind of named after the group. But what they do is they go into schools. They say, hey, show us your 5 worst kids, and they take them and they mentor them and they put them through ceremonies and steps, accomplishments, and they let them vent and they pair them up with with an adult, to have a male figure, and their success rate is huge. It's huge. They turn these kids around. And I was talking to the founder, and he said something like 85% of them have no dad. 85% of them have no dad. That's something to consider, and it's something to work on. But
yeah, it really is. There's kids need a dad. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a boy or a girl. Kids need a manly influence, because dads are going to do things different than moms do, and maybe it's a little rougher on the edges. But the kids absolutely need that sort of stuff. I don't want to say I was tough on my kids, but kids need a dad in their life, and everything ends up being more balanced. I think, having been, I always say I was raised by a pack of women. Having been raised by a pack of women, the male friendships I've had, bonding with guys, has always been it's always been great for me, and I really. Yeah, I treasure that sort of stuff. The greatest times I've had when I spent 10 years playing in a Motown disco funk band, and the best times we had are when it's me and all the other guys in the band, and we're just sitting around, and it's we're at someone's wedding, and we're just fooling around in the green room, hanging out, and that was better than playing at the wedding and watching the dances and all that sort of stuff. It's having that time to bond with other guys, and having, for me, it was having quality guy time. And I'd hear stories of guys who were like, oh, I went for a guy weekend, and we went here and did some sort of trip or something. I'm like, man, I never really did that. But I had my time in the band, but nothing like that. And I think it's super important for kids to have a fatherly influence. And I'm sure it would. Of course, it's going to help. 85%. That's awesome.
Yeah, it'd solve a lot of problems. It'd solve a lot of problems. It seems to be the root of a lot of issues. So what do you, if you could, paraphrase, what are you hopeful for? What are you looking to accomplish with all that you're doing on YouTube and everything in the Second Amendment world, the instruction that you do? What are you hopeful will happen? How is the world going to be different?
So what I want to do with Riding Shotgun is one of my goals is I want to film a show in every state, and I've made it to half of the states and to Washington D.C. so far. I have 5 states east of the Mississippi that I need to get to, and I need to get out west. That's one of my goals. The other thing that I want non-gun folks to see that gun folks are regular folks just like they are. They're not any different. They've had things happen to them, and they've changed their mind about gun ownership, or they got into it for something that you wouldn't really think of. And it's not, like you said before, we don't all have the same story on our path to ownership. But I do think, I kind of think that our gun ownership path is the same. So, when I tell people that when I first started to carry a gun, I carried it unloaded, I'm like, yes, I know it's dumb, I know it's crazy, I know it's ridiculous. I know that gun owners make fun of people that don't carry around in the chamber or that carry an unloaded gun. But you know what? I had, like you said, the rite of passage. I had to get used to having a gun on my body. I had to get used to carrying it. And now it feels weird to not have it on me, but I had to get used to carrying a gun before I would carry one loaded. I think people are all on that path, that we're where we want to eventually carry to be able to protect ourselves. And I've gone so far off the rail, I forgot what you asked.
What in general? What do you look at? What do you hope your mark is on the world? What do you hope all your efforts do to change the world?
Yeah, I think we need to let non-gun folks know that gun owners we're regular folks. We're not the crazy bloodthirsty lunatics that we often get made out to be. I had a friend of mine ask me, she's like, what do you think about the insurrection, all the Trump supporters? I'm like, I think the police let them in. She's like, where did you see this? I saw it on video where the police moved the barricade and they let all these people in, and I don't think those are your typical Trump supporters or right-wing nuts or anything like that. I don't think that's what those people were. And I think with my show, I'm trying to let, hey, listen, this person's got guns all over their house, but when you get them in a car and talk to them, they've got kids and they've got a loving relationship between the husband and wife, and they want to be able to protect themselves. We're just like everybody else, man. We're no different than anyone.
That's awesome. And I think you're doing a good job. I think you're headed exactly in that direction.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
You were talking about holsters. I've only gotten a new holster a couple times, but I actually, for the first month when I get a new holster, you break it in and you try it out and you wear it around the house and all that other stuff. I think that for the first month of a new holster, no matter what, you shouldn't carry with one in the chamber. And everybody jumps all over me about that. Oh my God, Mike, it might as well be a paperweight. Yeah, okay, fine. But until you have confidence in that brand new piece of equipment, I'm trying to make that the Schwartz rule, that you carry without one in the chamber for the first month when you get a new holster.
Yes, I get it's a paperweight and a bludgeoning tool without a round in the chamber. Until you're comfortable with it, until you're confident with it, you're not sure if it's going to be some sort of liability, and you've got to get used to having it on you. And I have a crossbreed holster that I absolutely love, and it's formed to. I have extra retention device. That is a Dunlap, as they call it in the South, where your belly Dunlaps over the belt. And I love my crossbreed holster. I wore it for years and years and years. It's formed to my, the leather's formed to my body, which is awesome. I decided at one point that I needed to switch to an ankle holster because I wanted to carry to and from work, and I can't carry at work. So I could lock the gun in the car while I'm at work. I can put it on when I leave, and it's much harder to put on an inside the waistband holster on the inside of your car than it is to put a gun on your ankle. When I started to carry on my ankle, I started to realize I crashed my leg into the leg of chairs and tables, and it's just a new thing to get used to, and I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, right. We're really good we're really good at making mountains out of molehills. I mean, just the fight over Glock versus 1911 and 9mm versus 45. It's just, sometimes it's fun, but sometimes it's so draining. Oh my gosh. But
yeah, when people want to get into that fight, I say, look, I carry a 5-shot revolver, so you guys can say whatever you want. I'm out. I'm going to go drink a beer. I'll talk to you guys later.
So you are, I believe you're now on the Polite Society podcast, right?
I am. I've been very fortunate to have a good relationship with Paul Lathrop and all the folks at the Second Amendment Foundation, and they did. Paul Lathrop had a career change, and he started doing more shows for the Second Amendment Foundation through the Polite Society podcast. And after being on a couple of these, I said, "Hey, I'd like to be on a couple more shows, And so he said, "All right, we'll add you to the Polite Society staff. So when we have shows and we need someone, if you can fill in, that would be great."
That's awesome. So how do people find that? How do people find the Polite Society podcast?
The Polite Society, actually, there's a great group of shows. Most of them are podcasts, but it's called the Self-Defense Radio Network. It's sdrn.us. You can find there's 14 or 15 shows there. But you can find Riding Shotgun there, as well as the Polite Society podcast. You can find Rob Morris's Self-Defense Gun Stories there. You can find Eye on the Target Radio, which is a great show, and Geeks and Gadgets. Guns and Gadgets? No, Geeks and Gadgets. Geeks and Guns, sorry. There's the Armed Lutheran. There's the Locked and Loaded Latinos. Self-Defense Radio Network, sdrn.us, the Self-Defense Radio Network. It's their phrases. It's all your pro-freedom podcasts in one place.
And your website is ridingshotgunwithcharlie.com, right?
Yep, ridingshotgunwithcharlie.com. I put all my episodes there. I've got a YouTube channel, so I put all the videos on YouTube. I also put all the videos on the Gunstreamer, gunstreamer.com website, and you can also find them on the OpsLens app. And if you just listen to the show, you can listen to the show in a podcast form on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio, and I think a couple of other places pick it up as well.
Okay, cool. What else do you want people to know about you or guns, or what else would you like to make sure people understand about any part of what we talked about?
So one of the other things that I wanted to be when I was growing up was a comedian, and I spent some time doing stand-up comedy, and I try to tell people I'm trying to bring fun ownership to gun ownership.
Nice.
And that's kind of what I'm working towards. How can we make this? Not that it's not fun. It's not like I could be Master Ken. I don't know if you've had some Master Ken's videos, right?
Oh yeah. The guy in the red gi. Yes.
Exactly. So his is certainly a different route. The way that I am, I'm a little quick-witted and not necessarily sharp-tongued, but that is kind of the format that I like. So sitting down and talking to someone one-on-one for riding shotgun is a breeze, and if something comes up that's funny, I'd like to bring it up, and get some little jab in there, and like I said, bring fun ownership to gun ownership with the GunGrams, with riding shotgun.
And speaking of comedians, you had a little interaction with Adam Carolla at one point, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love the Ace Man. Since I didn't listen to Loveline, but I obviously did watch the Man Show. And a couple years ago, he was going to be performing in Boston, and he was doing this segment called Adam Carolla is Unprepared. And what he wanted people to do was to write a word on a ping pong ball. So I was going to the show, and I emailed him and he said he was looking for people to pull ping pong balls out of a ping pong ball hopper. So I sent him a GunGram of Man Eater, which is a song that he absolutely hates.
Man Eater by Hall & Oates.
By Hall & Oates, yes. He's like, Hall & Oates has so many great songs. Man Eater is not one of them. He's like, it's just a piece of junk. So I had to do this for somebody. Somebody paid me to do this as a GunGram. And I sent it to Adam Carolla, and I said, hey, this is what I do. I think I should be the person to pull ping pong balls for you. So his producers got a hold of me and said, Adam wants to talk to you. You're in the running of people that want to pull ping pong balls. And so I was on his podcast, which was really cool. And they watched the video, and they're like, does he play trumpet with his left hand or with his right hand? And which hand is he shooting with? And it was really cool. So he picked me. And he picked both of us that were in the contending. He picked both of us. The other was a pregnant woman that was taking her husband and his best friend. So she was the designated driver. And they're like, listen, bring your trumpet. Maybe Adam will have you play something. So I actually went out. I bought a Nerf gun and 200 rounds of Nerf gun ammo.
Wow.
And I brought that and my trumpet to the Carolla show. And I'm like, just in case I could stay true to my brand and, shoot Nerf gun bullets from the stage. I never ended up playing, but I got to stand on stage and read ping pong balls to Adam Carolla.
Nice. You get to meet him a little bit, talk to him?
I just got my picture backstage, which was really cool. But last spring, he often makes fun of his father, who's also a trumpet player, and so he tweeted something about his dad being a bad trumpet player, and I wrote and I tweeted back and I said, he probably needs to do some long tones. It's probably his embouchure, but it could just be his age. And so he read my tweet on the air, and then he played another little clip of the GunGrams. He's like, you know what? I love this guy. This guy's great.
That's a way better brush with celebrity than Al Gore.
Absolutely.
I love the Man Show, and what I think about every now and then is how different. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel was the other part of the Man Show, and those guys just, I don't even know if they have anything to talk about anymore. They've gone such a different direction.
It really is. And what's really funny to me is one of the Man Show bits is where Jimmy Kimmel dressed up as Oprah Winfrey and, made some jokes about her using the toilet or something. And then you see him on all of these shows and you're like, is that really the same guy? Did he sell his soul for something? And Adam Carolla
certainly his Man Show card, I think.
Right. Oh man, yeah, I love Carolla, man. I love his attitude about everything, and he likes to stick it to your governor out there.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, which is great.
He's great, and I listened to Loveline, And, it was all fairly interesting, but the most interesting stuff was the little in-betweens and the little quirkiness that Adam would put in there. Like, it seemed like every other caller, and he pointed this out all the time. It was hilarious. Every other caller would need to change the battery.
The batteries.
Sure.
Those are great because he talks about those and he's like, how long has that been going on? They're like 10 months.
Yeah. And I remember at least once he was like, okay, look, we're going to solve this right now. Do you have a 9-volt battery? And like walked them through changing. Anyway, yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Charlie, congratulations on your success. I really appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the great work. I hope your car makes it out to little old San Diego out here. And, I would love to buy you a beer and show you around.
I would love to, man. I am planning on getting the stagecoach to the West Coast. And when the stagecoach gets out there, we are definitely going to have to hang out and have a drink and a cigar.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Thanks for watching our Magnum show, where we dig into gun owners' topics a little more in depth. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.